There he is. So yeah, let's talk a little NFL offseason. Picking up where we left off on the podcast. If first off, I'm Brandon Leopoldis. I'm the SLA's outreach captain for one of them for Southern California. So thrilled to be here with you guys, and wanted to introduce Mike Tannenbaum, longtime NFL insider, front office exec with the Dolphins and the Jets, one of the most respected guys in the game, and a longtime SLA member, as well as J.R. Tolver, who record setter at San Diego State, draft choice of the Miami Dolphins way back in the day, had a nice NFL career, now lives in San Diego. And so I'm thrilled that they're both joining us to talk kind of what's going on this time of year for players, for teams, for everybody involved in the NFL. So guys, wanted to lead off. We just saw what happened with Dak Prescott, who just got paid an entire mountain of money that hopefully will not collapse his very fragile ankle right now. So, Mike, can you walk us through? The question is he worth it? And for those of us that work in football a little bit, we know that oftentimes it's not about worth, it's about timing. And so if you could kind of walk us through what kind of decision gets made when you hand a player 9 figures worth of money.
Yeah, great to be with you, Brandon, and welcome everybody. And I think you nailed it. It's about timing and leverage, and there's been a lot about what Dallas should have done and when they should have done it, but I don't think there's any question they got the right guy. To me, he's a productive, high-character player who's a great leader, and those are hard to find. And when you have one and you're lucky enough to have one, you do everything you can to make sure that he stays with you. So maybe they were a year or two late in terms of value, but what I would say is if they had to overpay by a couple $1 million, that's well worth it, because the alternative is you're going to spend a whole lot of time, effort to try to replace Dak Prescott with someone that in all likelihood won't be as good. So I think it's something that Dallas should have done. And look, the cap's going to go down this year, but over the course of the deal, if you feel like you overpaid by a couple $1 million, you find that from, the linebacker position. I'm sorry, just having a little problem here with my Zoom. You find it from the linebacker position, the safety position, but it starts with the quarterback. They were lucky enough to have him, and you make sure that he stays.
Now, they gave him, what was it, $75 million this year. I had a law student ask last night, does he get all that money this year? And is it a salary cap thing? How does that work out? Does Dak get a check in the mail today that's, the size of one in the U.S. Open? Or does he is that just more of a figure that's used for salary cap purposes?
Yeah, so great question. Basically, the way it works is you prorate the sign bonus over the life of the contract. So the reason the cap's going down, his number from 37 to 22, is they were able to prorate the signing bonus, and that allows them to sign other players. And the way that works is you take $75 million, and even though it's reported as a 4-year deal, what happens is they added 2 more years. So instead of $75 million divided by 4, it's $75 million divided by 6, which lowers the number. The 5th and the 6th year will go away, what's known as voidable years. When those years go away, we're talking about 4 years from now, the rest of what's been paid to the player that hasn't hit the cap will actually hit the cap. In terms of when the cash actually gets paid to the player, typically we try to spread that out over several months. There's a couple of times a year where national TV dollars are actually wired to the respective teams' accounts. And that is usually like sometime like in mid-June, right around the start of the season. And something like that size, you're going to pay out over, a long period of time. So he may get a third or a half of it in 30 days. I mean, it's obviously huge dollars, Brandon. But it'll all be paid probably within 8 or 9 months.
Got it. Now, JR, you have been on that field, and you've experienced the draft. You've experienced being released. We saw the names are starting to trickle out this offseason about guys that are no longer going to be on a team because they're cap casualties, such as one of my favorites, Emmanuel Sanders, just got cut by the Saints. Breaking news here at the SLA. wanted to walk through that process with you. What's that like when you're a second year player, you know, you're going to be on the team, compared to when they do eventually release you? How does that happen? Do they call you in? Is it a phone call? How does that work?
Man, I tell people all the time, like, any day you put your key fob up against that door and the door opens, you're in a good spot. And honestly, it's day to day like that. You know, I think about like Josh Rosen. Like, it is mind blowing that this kid was the number 1 draft pick in 2018, was traded in 2019, was on the practice squad in 2020, and is now on the street. Like, this is the number 1 draft pick in the NFL from basically less than 3 years ago. So the NFL, man, is the most competitive environment you will ever find yourself in. And if you ever walk into a locker room and you think that locker belongs to you, you're probably not in the right mentality and the right mindset. And it doesn't matter. I think that's why Tom Brady is so good. Tom Brady kind of shows up every day and pays the rent every single day, knowing that, you know, he's only one bad throw or one ankle injury away from the next Tom Brady coming into the game and taking his spot. So I don't think as a player, literally, you're ever comfortable that your roster spot is secured, whether you just signed a deal or if you signed a deal 2 or 3 years ago. In the NFL, man, it's a show up every day and prove it type of a situation.
Now, when you have to show up and prove it every day, and you had mentioned that there's a steep learning curve, especially on the podcast, we had talked a lot about that. With that, what is that like when you first enter that NFL locker room? How different is it than the college level, where you may be the man in college and you know that locker belongs to you, and then you walk in and you have Hall of Famers on your team, or you have a guy making $140 million?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in the NFL is, and I've said this before, like, physically the biggest jump is from high school to college. Because think about it, when you go from high school, you're 18 years old. Now you get into college and you're sharing a locker room with guys who are 22, 23 years old. Some of the guys are married. Some of the guys have kids. Some of the guys already have a little bit of male pattern baldness, right? Like, you're dealing with men. Like, you go from high school, being a boy in high school, to dealing with men in college. So physically, the jump from high school to college is a much bigger jump. Now, when you go from the college to the NFL, the jump isn't really physical. Like, you're not going to get on the field and see something that you've never seen before. At this point, you've seen every strong guy, every tall guy, every fast guy. Like, you're not going to see something that you haven't seen before. The jump is mentally. And it makes total sense. As a college player, you really only get so many hours a week to dedicate to your sport. As an NFL player, you're forced 40 hours a week of dedicating to your sport, not even including what you do outside of what the team mandates that you do. So the hardest thing, I think, in going from college to pro, people talk about the speed of the game. It's not a physical speed. I think it's more a mental speed, just because guys have more time to dedicate it. So that's how you kind of stay in the locker room. And that's where the learning curve comes in. You dive in mentally so that you can catch up mentally as fast as you can, based off the fact that the guys that are in that locker room have been doing that for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years before you got there.
Sure. Now, Mike, kind of an interesting dynamic when you're a front office exec. People often don't think about the contracts that a general manager, club president, and others in the front office also have, and so that they need that team to be successful. Jerry Jones, a little different story. He has said, if he was not the general manager, he probably would have fired somebody that's made the same moves he has. And so with that, when you're making these decisions, how often do you even think about your own contract, or does a GM or a club president think, man, if we sign this guy, it's going to be my butt on the line?
I think the axiom of winning for today and developing for tomorrow is really consequential. You know, I was very lucky. I was at one organization for 16 years, the other one for 4 in a full-time capacity. And I always try to have those sort of like competing notions in my head. And I was unbelievably lucky in my career. The New York Jets in 1996 won one game. In 1997, Coach Parcells and Coach Belichick both went there together. I got hired there. We won 9 games. And the following year, we were in the AFC Championship game. So I don't believe that it takes a long time for rebuilds and this whole notion of tanking. Because I lived it in the formative years of my career. I saw 2 Hall of Fame coaches come in and truly transform an organization. And my first year in charge in Miami, my first year in charge at Jets, we went to the playoffs. So it can be done. And I think you have to be balanced and reasoned to make sure that you're developing players for the next, couple of years. And candidly, it's hard. I look back at, some of the mistakes I made. Maybe it was at times being, more aggressive from a standpoint of like, hey, you know what, we're going to go with the backup here. And we're going to make sure that that player gets developed, because if they get an opportunity, we could probably win with them. And you're constantly dealing with that because the cap in our sport, unlike others, is a great equalizer. And it keeps you within a bandwidth of how much you can spend. Everyone has the same draft choice allocation. Obviously, that order will change. So you have to look for competitive advantages, and being able to develop players and get them on the field quicker gives you a better chance of having sustainability.
Great. Well, and one thing that talks about sustainability is the draft, right? That's how often teams are going to build a championship caliber team. And I talked to a friend of mine the other day at an NFL front office, and they said that they think that their team probably supplies the magnet and label industry with all of their revenue for the year leading into the draft, because they put everybody's name on a magnet, and they have, I guess they have a free agent list and a draft list right next to each other. And as the draft unfolds, names get moved around and teams are making decisions in these little 10-minute increments. What is that like on draft day and leading into the draft when, especially if you have a high pick, your entire team's future may, depend on the effectiveness of a player you draft and say a top 10 pick. And what happens when you're at that marginal stage where you think we might as well just get a free agent? And as the draft opens up, the surprises always happen. So how do you work through those scenarios leading into drafting?
Yeah, you just never know what's going to happen. 2016, the number one player on our board was Laramie Tunsil. Not just like the number one tackle, like the number one football player was Laramie Tunsil. And I remember when we were doing our due diligence on him, we're like, we're wasting our time. We got a good player, Brandon Albert, at left tackle. We're picking 13. He's going to go 1. Like, what are we doing here? Like, we're wasting our time. And for some of you on the Zoom may remember, there was a sort of an adverse video of Laramie Tunsil that was released about 45 minutes before the draft. And teams were scrambling because they didn't know what the context of it was. And we fell back on our preparation, Brandon, and felt like we got the best pick in the draft at 13 because we had really good reports on him. He was a great person, had made a mistake, and it was a great opportunity for us at the time.
Now, Greg, leading into the draft as a college player, what sort of communications do you have with your agent? A lot of people, even in the legal field, want to be agents. And can you talk a little bit about how that communication was for you leading into what's got to be a scary and also a very exciting time for you when you change from that amateur player to a professional player?
Sorry, I was on mute there. I think one of the, if I'm an agent, I'm just going to be honest. Because, I look back on it a couple of years after I got done playing, and agents don't know. Like, there's no way you can know. I mean, you can think, you can have conversations, you can suspect. And if you're, a top 60 guy, then you have some sort of idea. But if I'm an agent and I got a player who is has a draft grade, and sometimes that grade is from 3 to 7 or whatever, I would just be honest. And I'd be like, yo, be prepared. Like, you may get drafted in the 3rd. You may go undrafted. At the end of the day, like, that shit doesn't matter. Like, once the player or once the team signs you and they let you in that locker room, they believe that you can make the team. So don't get offended. Don't get butthurt. Don't think, because they drafted me in the 5th, I should have been drafted in this. Like, don't even allow those thoughts to enter your head. And that's how, if I was an agent, I would approach it with guys. I say, look, I don't know where you're going to go. I don't know how you're going to get there. I've had conversations with 15 teams. They all tell me they love you. They all tell me they're going to take you in the third, but I don't know. I don't know how this is going to work out. Just know that whenever your name gets called, you got to be ready to turn the switch on, because that team won't let you in the locker room if they don't believe you can make their team. So don't allow the feeling of being drafted higher or being drafted lower take away from the reality of you still got to go out and prove these guys right. You know, you're trying to prove everybody wrong before you get drafted, but once you get drafted, now you go prove everybody right. Hey, you took the right guy, you got the right character, you got the right work ethic, you got all the things that they're hoping that you could bring to that locker room.
Well, and as we know, the not for long league changes their mind every once in a while on you. And when that key fob doesn't work for the door and it's time to find that new place, what is that like for you as a player when all of a sudden you're unemployed and you got to find another team? Do you know that that's coming? Do you have an idea that that's coming? And then how long does it take for you to circle back up with your agent and your other advisors to figure out what the next step is?
Yeah, I remember Chris Carter when they still had the rookie symposium, which was like I was drafted in 2003. So Chris Carter spoke at our symposium and he said he got released from – Mike, who did Chris get released from? The Eagles, right? The Eagles before he got picked up by the Vikings. So he got released and he said, for the first time in my life, I was not on a team. And he was like, that's a feeling that I will always remember, right? And so I think if that happens to you, you have to acknowledge that that's what it is. Hey, I'm not on a team and I may not ever be on a team again. How do I want to approach this? Do I want to keep working out knowing that there's an opportunity for me to get picked back up and put on a team? If I do, then I commit to doing that the best way that I can. If I don't, then I jump out of it. I think the hardest part for guys is having 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like when you get cut, I think that's a come to Jesus moment where you say, I just got released. I am not on a team right now. Do I want to get back on a team? If the answer is yes, then I continue to put 100% of my energy and my effort to training, to eating, to doing all the things that when I do get picked back up, I'm still a good player. Or I just jump out. You know what? I got released. I'm ready to move on with my life. And you do that. But it's not an easy decision. But I think the process becomes harder when guys are 50-50. And that's another thing that I think agents can do a great job of saying, like, hey, listen, like, let's talk through this. I'm not here to tell you what to do, but let's go ahead and talk through this and figure out how we want to handle this situation over the next 90 days so that I can support you any way that you want to go.
Good point. I think it's a good peek behind the curtain a little bit. So I want to open it up for questions for those of you that are here. Josh Goldberg's a Miami Dolphin fan. I guarantee it from the hat. So I know that he may grill you guys about a game that happened in 2004 or something, but love to open it up for questions. Anybody? If not, I have 100.
I'll ask a question.
Go ahead, Josh.
How's it going? So earlier today, we saw that the new cap number is $182.5 million, which is down around $16 million from last year. And we've already seen a lot of veteran players being cut. How are NFL front offices dealing with the time frame of signing veteran free agents right now when we know that there's an impending TV deal coming that will boost the salary cap back up, but it's ugly right now?
I'll take that. I think what we're going to see is a lot of like 1-year deals this year. So players can get back out to the market, and there should be robust revenue down the road in terms of the TV deals, also other new sources of revenue like gambling. So my expectation would be we're going to see a lot of shorter term deals so players can get back out to the market. And obviously the pandemic was the big driver here, and the cap, I guess, nominally went down once before. in around 2011, but to go down, I think it was like roughly about 8% is very significant.
How's that work with players, JR? Do you guys are you guys even cognizant of, say, the cap number or your cap number, or are you just trying to make sure that you make the team and leave that to the agent?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on where you are in your career. You know, if you're a rookie last year, that cap number doesn't mean anything to you because the signing bonus that you got last year was already predetermined. You might get a little bit of a trickle again this year. There's a player performance bonus that comes from the NFLPA. You know, the lower you're drafted and the more you play, the more money the PA will pay you in addition to the money you made in salary and signing bonus. So depending on where you are in your career, if you're in that like first 2 or 3 years, what's happening on the outside world doesn't matter because you're pretty much locked in. Now, if I'm a free agent like a Levante David, right, and I know that coming off of a Super Bowl win, where arguably now I'm like the best linebacker in the game, and I'm up for kind of contract negotiations, or JC Jackson, somebody who's maybe restricted and about to get tenured, yeah, I'm definitely paying attention to it. And to Mike's point, I think the player is really like dependent on the agent to give them good advice. You know, if the agent says, hey, look, like, I know you want to secure a long-term deal, but now is probably not the time, because if I secure you long-term, you're probably going to get 30% less than if you secure yourself long-term a year from now. Players have to be willing and open to listen to that, because again, it's a very fickle business. You know, if I go out and get hurt, maybe I don't end up like Dak Prescott, where the team says, hey, I believe you. I got an example of the kid from, he went to San Diego State. He plays for the Falcons, Damontae Kazee. So Damontae Kazee led the league in interception 2 years ago as a safety. He got hurt, tore his Achilles last year, and was in that contract year where if he hadn't torn his Achilles, he would have broke the bank. And the Falcons haven't decided, at least from what I've seen up until this point, to re-up him, to, you know, put that extra money into him. So I think it's one of those weird times where, you know, as a player, you got to kind of balance the now with the later. And it's hard to do. I wish there was a science to it, but some of it is just gut, to be honest with you.
Sure. Happy to throw some other questions in. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going because this is fantastic for me.
Yeah, I have a quick question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Tyler, go ahead.
Hey guys, how are you? I played in the minor leagues in hockey, but I did not have an agent. I did everything myself. So my question is for you, as you know, somebody who's in the business, are agents talking to players, or do you think agents should talk to players about planning for life after, well, football in this case, obviously, but after, you know, whatever sport it is they are playing? You know, how much are agents doing that? Is it something where you have to read your client, you know, because the client could get offended? Why are you talking to me about, you know, life after? I want to do this. I'm going to do this forever. So, you know, my dad was kind of that for me about, I knew I was going to law school and that's what I was going to do. So that was my plan. But I just wanted to know how agents handle that, or how you think agents should handle that.
I can help take that first. I would say, I think it takes a collective effort in terms of it's the agent's responsibilities, it's the league, it's the players associations, it's the teams. And, you know, we throw these numbers around like, you know, salary cap's going to be $182 million. That's a lot of money. And the worst thing is when players transition to society and they don't have the money they saved. If you're in the league 3 or more years, the benefits are unbelievable. And you just hope that, you know, pro football creates a platform, you know, financially and otherwise, where they can make whatever transition players would like to make. And we're all in it together. We have a affirmative responsibility for players to have a fulfilling, productive experience in the NFL and then afterwards. And the smart ones, the smart agents, the smart players, that they plan on it really like from day one. And when you're in the NFL, and JR touched on this, like everyone's going to take your call. So the more you get be on the front end of it and proactive, the better end you will be served on the back end.
Yeah, I think the other side of that is it's a progression, right? So when you first get into the NFL, if you're not spending more than 90% of your time to stay in the NFL, you're doing something wrong, you know? And I think as you get older, maybe that starts flipping a little bit. You know, I saw some guys really do some wonderful stuff. I mean, I was teammates with Junior Seau, and, you know, I was with Junior Seau when he was a veteran, and he had a restaurant down in San Diego, and he had a foundation, and he had all these things. But that was the later career Junior Seau. You know, I think what you find is guys that are coming in right away trying to be like a business mogul or whatever, and they've only been in the league for like 1 or 2 years. They put themselves at a disservice. So I think that first year or two should be 95% of the time should be spent on staying and making the team. But the coolest thing I think about the 5% is leverage. Like, you can really leverage your off the field team to help you while you're focusing 95% of your time, energy, and effort on staying in the league. That 5% should be your off the field team really working their ass off to make sure that they're doing all the things for you that you can't do yourself. And then eventually I feel like that'll teeter-tot. And if a guy stays in the league for 3 years, then that team has worked hard for him to maximize those 3 years. And if he stays in the league for 14 years, then he's still going to get the benefit of having, you know, a really strong, focused team help him develop off the field stuff while he is primarily focused on staying on the field.
Yeah, Mike, you know, I know that as a Bronco fan, I always look forward to Alumni Day and seeing all the old names come back and, you know, at least wave their hat in the air for 2 or 3 seconds there in the parade of old players. With that, the teams now are starting to do a lot more with alumni, and it seems to be a little more cognizant than just a tax deduction or a way to say, you know, thanks for the memories. It seems to be that there's some active participation with the teams to make sure that their former players are engaged and have some additional resources. Is there a talk of that in the offseason each year, or is there a specific department within the organizations that deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the Dolphins are probably, if not, Kansas City does a great job of this too, if not the best, certainly one of the best. And obviously that has a lot to do with the weather in South Florida, and a lot of the players retire around where the Dolphins train. And even when I was with New York there, it's definitely like a win-win where they could be a great resource for current players in terms of like just sharing their life experiences, the good, the bad, what they would have done differently. And I think the retired players like that aura of association that's created where they can come back and feel like they're still part of something bigger than themselves. So I think that's a win-win. And again, I think organizations and certainly the NFL has an affirmative responsibility to take those who, you know, played in the past that certainly laid a foundation that everyone has benefited from.
Sure. Yeah. JR, do you take any, do you answer those emails? Do you follow those emails, and what benefit are those for you?
Man, listen, I've leveraged the Shield into many different things, into many different dollars, into many different free field trips, into many different door openers. I mean, you know, once you have that Shield on your resume, it's lifelong. It gives you lifelong benefit. And, you know, there's not a day that goes by where I either proactively use it to open a door or a conversation, or somebody brings it to me. I mean, it's not a day that goes by. And I really think that that's how you look at the NFL. You know, you look at the NFL as, you know, whether I'm in this locker room for 3 months or 10 years, I know that when they kick me out the locker room and my key fob doesn't work, they can never take away the fact that my picture was on that website, my name was on the back of that jersey. And if I am not using that to my benefit forever, that's on me. That's not on them. And then Mike alluded to it. The benefits that you get for being in the league for 3 years are phenomenal. I mean, I literally have made more money at this point at 41 from the NFL after the NFL than I did when I was in the NFL. And I think that that's one of the pieces of the puzzle that, going back to the agent conversation, dude, like, just hammer on your guys to stay focused, stay out of trouble, stay on the team, make it to year 3, because if they can get past year 3, they will be like me, 41 years old, still collecting a check from the NFL, still receiving letters and benefits from the NFL, still getting invited. Me and my wife have gone to Santa Barbara 2 out of the last 3 years on a trip from the NFL that they do for players and their spouses. So work your butt off to stay in the league for at least 3 years, because if you do that, that 3-year plan can turn into a 33-year benefit pretty easily. And these are some of the things that I think that as the off the field team really need to be hammering, because being in the NFL is a lot of fun. You make a lot of money. You have a lot of parties and friends and all that good stuff. But if you can stay focused long enough at the primary task at hand, you can literally live off the shield until the day that you leave this earth.
Good deal. Well, I appreciate that insight, because I think a lot of people forget about when the lights turn off, what happens. So one thing for both of you is, if you could point everybody's direction business-wise to the game of football, what's something that's interesting you that you're going to follow this year that you think other people should watch a little bit closer?
For me, probably happened yesterday was Dak Prescott. Just that was something that went on for, literally like 3 years, and it finally got resolved. So I thought that was really interesting. And then I think the league's also on the precipice of these new TV deals, and where do those come in? What do those look like? And who has what rights? I think it'll be interesting, especially with the proliferation of some of these like non-traditional media parties. So Facebook, Amazon, Apple TV, if we're having this conversation in 6 months, like who has what rights, I think it'll be a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, I think for me, it's this bridge that's about to happen with the NCAA allowing players to make off the field money, or out of the sport money, off their name, image, and likeness. I'm really interested to see how that comes together. I think that that's going to change the amateur sports world and the professional sports world. I don't know if it's going to change it for good or if it's going to change it for bad, but I think we'll find out. We'll find out pretty quickly. That's one. And another one is J.C. Jackson, the kid from the Patriots. I'm really interested to see what happens with him. I mean, this kid came into the league as an undrafted free agent, and he has more interceptions than any other player since he's come into the league. I'm really interested to see how the Patriots approach him now that he's going into the 4th year of his deal. So those are kind of the 2 of the things that I'm looking at in terms of the business of the league.
I have to say, when I asked that question, I think I knew what was coming from Mr. Tolver there. Also, the one thing that I saw today that I think is rather interesting is talks between the XFL, now owned by The Rock and his partners, and the CFL, to see what may happen there. I think that's going to be really interesting to see how a fledgling league is going to see if they can integrate into an existing league that's had some really good success over the last 60 years. So I think an NFL alternative is probably just good for the football landscape, give players an opportunity to play elsewhere. And, the XFL or the CFL at one point had some American teams, and we'll see if that can come back. So, Mike, please let everybody know how we can find you now, what you're doing, and who you're working with.
Yeah, I'm with ESPN and do a lot of things around actually this time of year. So the draft, free agency, and comment about all the sorts of things along those lines. And then I'm involved with a website called the 33rd Team. It's the 33rdteam.com. And we just put out sort of like thoughtful pieces around the NFL. We have a free newsletter if you want to sign up for it.
Awesome. Mr. Tolver, please tell us about the myriad of activities you have going on and all that's going on in your life.
Yeah, man, it's funny. I actually own a small State Farm agency in San Diego. So I've had a insurance agency for the last 4 years. And as a result, Tyler, you kind of mentioned this. I've started really understanding like all the different off the field components and how they work together, how they should work together, how they aren't working together. So my insurance background has kind of gotten me interested in legal and finance and accounting and all these things, right? And I really believe that one of the things that I'm actively working on right now is there a way for players to have their cake and eat it too, to be 95% focused on the field, but have a kick-ass interdependent team off the field focused on the 5% so that they can have everything they earn on the field and get all the benefits off the field. So Brandon and I have talked a lot about this. Actually threw up a website the other day, athletellc.com, and really just kind of starting to really explore how players can benefit themselves as a business off the field while also not taking away from the focus of being on the field. So that's a work in progress, keeps me energized. But day to day, I sell car insurance to keep my wife out of my keep my wife happy. So it's all good.
Nice. Well, any last questions here? We're almost up against our time. Want to make sure that we give everybody one last chance to ask a question if they have it.
I have one quick question. So with the Dak Prescott deal that just happened, Lamar Jackson is probably one of the happiest players in the NFL right now, but he does not have an agent. So what do you think about his like upcoming negotiations with the Ravens? Like, how is the front office viewing that when they're negotiating with him and not an agent? And like, are they trying to take advantage of that scenario? Like, does he just go in there and say, I won't take a cent less than Dak Prescott? Like, how do you think that's going to work out?
In my career, it didn't happen often when I dealt with the player, and I really didn't like it. I felt like nothing good could come out of it. Either they felt like we took advantage of them, or whatever we did, it was very hard to explain. It was awkward. So it was very, very rare, but the handful of times it happened, I did not feel comfortable. And it's one thing to do a rookie deal in the CBA where basically things are negotiated. It's another to do like a massive, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars here. And I really hope for Lamar's sake that, well, him or his mom, which it's been reported, may be very actively involved with that negotiation. Hopefully there's somebody else in the room with them just as another set of eyes who has experience. Knowing the Ravens, they're a first-class organization. They wouldn't try to, quote-unquote, take advantage of Lamar, but they certainly have to do what's in their best interest. But when they're done, they're not going to want their franchise quarterback not to feel great about it. So I'm sure their strong recommendation is going to be like, hey, you need somebody else in this room as well.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. That rookie deal is pretty easy. I think agents know that, players know that, parents know that. So not necessarily having an agent on your rookie deal, you lose some benefits of not having an agent. But from a negotiation standpoint, I don't think it puts you in a bad spot. I would not want to, even with everything I know as a 41-year-old person that's been out of the league for 14 years at this point, I would not want to go into a contract negotiation without proper representation. Because you're right. I mean, if I'm a player and I take $4 million less because I didn't know I could get $4 million more, I didn't know how to pull the levers or negotiate the deal. Okay, yes, I saved 3% on the overall deal, but did I really save money or did I really cost myself money? So, and we've seen it. I mean, we've also seen agents negotiate bad contracts. I think about Ricky Williams' contract with, Master P in New Orleans, right? And so it's hard enough to negotiate a good contract, a great contract with a good agent. I couldn't imagine trying to do that without proper representation.
Well, good deal. I appreciate it. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. We'll have more of these. One's coming up about spring training. and the business behind spring training. I think might be even next week. Melissa will send out that email, but feel free to join us at any time. Mike, JR, thank you for joining us. Good luck as you guys prepare for another NFL season and handle the craziness that is the NFL offseason and the draft. So again, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. Happy to answer any questions about the SLA or about the podcast that we recorded. Feel free to check that out, or this virtual outreach event that we've just held. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.